Thanks for doing this. It's great to chat with you. I was just listening this afternoon on my drive home. I was planning for this, and I was listening to the tabletop podcast you did with Tom a couple years ago, and I love that show. I had heard it, actually. I'd heard your interview, you and Tomas, back when it aired.
Okay.
But I wanted to go back over it just to kind of refresh my memory. And I also wanted to go to the website and spend some time there to refresh my memory there as well, which is always a bad idea because it's a wormhole.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't have that. How come I don't have that? I gotta say, I don't want to get into my collecting nuances too much because every time I picked up your book, I would put it down and meditate on, should I be collecting this? Should I collect this? And but test pressings are the thing that I find to be the most elusive and the most sexy. Not so much modern when you know that some of these guys can be pressing, like they can press 250 of them because they know that they're going straight to the fans. But that idea of, I remember in, I think it was in Phil's book that they were taking going around to different mastering engineers with face value and having different versions of the album cut. And those records, that to me is just being a musician, being a studio guy, someone who does pressing, that the test pressings are kind of the Everest for me.
Yeah, for sure. Collectors love test pressings. They love the original of the original.
Yes.
And of course, there are different versions that come out because some of the test pressings were done before the final pressing was finished. And once the engineer hears it, he might change something.
Sure.
If you get into acetates, those can really be anything at all because those are cut with a machine. So you could be... you could have the demo version could be on there. We found some acetates that have versions that weren't used again. So they're great.
But you could be duped though, right? With acetates?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And I have before. We all have as collectors.
Yeah.
That's one of the downsides.
Yeah.
And I did find an acetate that was supposed to be from the original 73 version. And I listened to it, and it was from the 2007 remix version. So it was even sloppily faked.
Yeah.
So for sure, on acetates and test pressings to some degree, you do take a little bit of risk. You have to know as much as you can to try to avoid that. But sometimes we never know for sure.
That's right. Well, and I did see people were posting a lot, maybe a year ago, when there were a bunch of test pressings that came up, and I guess it was probably from the last box set that they did, right? That was kind of the presumption. Yeah. They're still interesting, but they definitely lose a little bit of value when you know they were just made by some guy a couple years ago.
Right. There's some test pressings that I've gotten from the engineer himself. That's always a bonus. I visited John Burns earlier this year and got some from him. But, sometimes people will get them from somebody who worked at the record company or radio station.
Sure.
And then you can be sure of the authenticity. And we love them because they're artifacts of the recording process. And as you said, you're a musician, so you have an interest in that for other reasons as well. But we love anything that are little pieces of archaeology for these items that we love to listen to. So
yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and I think that's what's so interesting about them. Have you found? I haven't even started my questions yet. I'm just already. We're starting this 6-hour chat right now. But have you found that some of the people holding on to some of these things, like mix engineers or whatnot, may not be diehard Genesis fans like you or I, or collectors that they're like, oh, I think I might have that kicking around, that they don't even really know or care too much that they have it?
Typically, they don't. Typically, they don't have the interest that we do. These are...
Okay.
I'm not sure what you do for work, but it would be like somebody looking at an old drawing you made at your job you would say, well, why is this interesting to me or
Hmm.
anybody else?
Yeah. Yeah.
So these people do not find the interest that we do, and they have them sitting somewhere in their loft somewhere.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is, depending on how you look at it, is these people, myself included, were getting up there in years, and anybody who was involved in working with Genesis and solo artists, they're up there in years as well. And so many
Mm-hmm.
of them have turned to uh, finding something to do with these items that they think
Right.
other people have use for. They
Yeah.
don't want to pass them to their kids. Their kids aren't interested in them. It isn't an inheritance to give somebody a pile of acetates. Well, you can give them to us. We'll be happy to take them. But in
Yeah.
general, they find that, well, maybe there's a better place for this stuff to go. And
Yeah.
so a lot of them have felt, okay, well, maybe it's time to just see who is interested and see where they can go.
You brought this up, so I wasn't going to bring it up because it's morbid, it's dark, and I don't want to think about it. But is there a an expiration date for this Genesis fandom? I mean, I think it's gone on about 30 years longer than I would have thought it would. But is there an end to it? Is there a generation that's ending, or do you think? I mean, and I, pop music in itself is so young, so it's hard to know. There's still Elvis Presley fans alive. So, what do you think that this might come to an end, or do you think that people will start to hear about Genesis and become the new versions of us?
Well, there's two sides of the collecting issue. They boil it down to supply and demand, but from the demand side, um, the new generation of kids aren't looking to hold on to things, to store them, to display them, to spend a lot of money on them. Some of
Yeah.
them are they're happy to have a house and a reasonable place to live in. They're not looking to fill it with random junk.
You're right.
And so from the demand side, I think that the next generation isn't looking for collectibles anyway.
Hmm.
And certainly they're not the fan base for a classic rock band, what you and I would consider a classic rock band, which is a band from 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
But for them, even a band from the 90s is kind of too old for them.
Right.
And they're not going to, they may be a fan of the band to some degree, but they're not going to be this fanatic collector spending lots of money on these things. So I think from the demand side, that would be a big issue. And from the supply side, as I was talking to some of these collectors for my book, they were seeing that as these people are getting older, if they're in their 70s because they were collecting when Genesis was starting out, they're not looking to keep this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Some of them are dying. Some of them are, in their 70s, 80s, and they're not around anymore. And once their collections start to hit the market, as they already are doing, that hits the supply side of the equation.
I see.
So if you saw an acetate and you're like, or a test pressing, and you're thinking, oh my God, this is really great. Think if you saw 30, or think if you saw 300. At some point, you would say, well, look, okay, I'm interested, but I'm not going to be spending the kind of money that it would have required in the 80s or 90s to buy this thing. Today, maybe the value has gone down because collector after collector is they're all of their items are showing up for auction, and that kills the price.
Well, and it's really there's no way to know because all of the collecting people, for whether it's for Beatles or Bob Dylan or Elvis or Genesis, they're still for the most part alive. And there's and magazines like Uncut and Rolling Stones, they're still keeping it alive. But so we don't know. We have no precedent as to what happens when maybe Sinatra, but I mean, and I guess maybe that is a start of the precedent. We don't see too many Tin Pan Alley era stuff kicking around. So maybe that is. But I'm hopeful though that younger generations, they hit an age, maybe in their 30s or 40s, when they start to feel nostalgic and they start to want to cling. This happened to me. Start to want to cling to that your childhood. Not that Genesis would be part of their childhood, but perhaps that's when they start to collect things.
Yeah, and I think it does depend as well on the band. There's, of course, someone like the Beatles or Elvis. These are perpetual, big collecting bands. They're always going to have value. Zeppelin, Floyd. These are bands where, I mean, you could sell. I always say you could find a Floyd item that would be worth everything in my entire museum would be worth one Floyd item
Wow.
in some cases
Wow.
because they're just that big. I mean, there was a huge Queen auction recently, all these Freddie Mercury costumes and lyrics and his original piano. I mean, those are things that are they're in the stratosphere compared to the Genesis items that we're dealing with. So, those sorts of bands may live forever or for longer. Genesis was sort of a bit of a niche band, and so I don't know if the same thing holds true 10 years from now. Sure, 20 years, maybe 30, I don't know.
Well, I would argue what the bands you're referring to, though, they had something, some sort of catastrophe, some sort of death that froze them in that time, and they didn't have that chance to kind of ruin their legacy, as some people have some people have said. You know, I always say that about Kurt Cobain. And would Kurt Cobain be on Dancing with the Stars this week if he was still alive? You know,
good point.
So it's you kind of wonder. Anyway, here's my thought. Okay, so let's talk about the Genesis Museum, which is an online museum for some of our fans. But this goes back to '99. Is that right?
Well, that's when I started the website.
Okay.
And 98, actually.
98. Okay.
Right. And I mean, I had been a collector for about 10 years by that point. I think I was collecting late 80s. I was trading videotapes. I was getting the Information Fan Club and seeing the names in the back of it. It had sort of had, I mean, this was obviously before the internet. There was addresses. You could have pen pals. I had some pen pals. And we would trade videotapes and audio tapes. And you had no way to see or hear these things other than by doing a trade. There was no YouTube by a long shot. There wasn't even really an internet to speak of. But by the late 90s, there was just starting to become internet and common in people's houses. They were scrambling for DSL and any kind of high speed. It was, you know, on a modem sometimes. Yeah. And so, yeah, in the late 90s, I started to put together the museum idea, which was let's share all of these items on a catalogable, searchable website. So I put all my items on there, and then I contacted my friends, which I'd had a lot of contacts by that point. I would travel to see their collection with a camera and take pictures of things. They would email me pictures, and I started to just build the website around that. And that was the collection side of it.
Right.
But in addition to that, we also did remastering projects. We had a DVD trading group, a Vine group, where you would send a copy to your friend, and he would make 2 copies and send 2 copies to. It was a reverse pyramid scheme, I guess. And very quickly, you could reach this group. I mean, we had several thousands of members, and you could reach all the groups with the items. So we would produce a DVD or a CD, and then it would just get distributed around to everybody so they could share it with not much cost. And so that was another side of the the museum that was kind of separate in a way. And while that was going on, I was also getting involved in the film work, which for those that don't know, Genesis was performing at a time when mostly the only way to record them video-wise was on an 8mm film camera. There were some 16mm, and there was some VHS kind of video. But generally speaking, when you're talking about any time in the 70s or early 80s, it's a 8mm. And I would contact people. I would search them out, try to have a relationship set up, and then scan those at the best that we could at the time, which was really DVD quality, if
Sure.
that, at the time. And then I would sync audio to them, which was a whole nother part of the process, because you may look at some of these films and say, oh, that looks great, but try it with no sound and see if you could pick out what's going on. And
oh my gosh,
it's quite a it's a puzzle. It's like I don't know, like a jigsaw puzzle.
So you would be looking for audience recordings or board recordings from the show that you think you know the night of, and then trying to manually sync it.
Right. And you start to get very good at lip reading, at looking at the lighting.
Wow.
Oh, there's a lot of symbols in this section. I bet it's this.
Yeah.
And you would try and I would say, the first one, I mean, there was so much wasted time on it to try to get it so that it was coherent. But after the years go on, you start to get kind of good at it, just like anything. Yeah. And so it doesn't take quite as long now. But
so the bands don't do the clapper like when they start a song,
right? Of course, yeah. No. And the audience, it depends if the person in the audience is taking something that would be 5 seconds of video or 50 seconds of video.
Yeah.
And when it's shorter, of course, it's a much longer process. So.
Well, I want to get into some of the technical things, but I just want to go back to our earlier conversation. And from 98 till now, I mean, did you have any concept that you would be still doing this 30 years later? And not only just still doing it as in puttering on, but actually creating some incredible content and in my opinion, on the upswing of what you're doing. Had that crossed your mind at all 30 years ago?
Not really. We always try to make the thing that we as fans would love to have seen. So as a collector, there was really nothing that spoke to us. There were no collectors' websites, really. You couldn't find a website with Genesis posters or Genesis collectibles on it. So I said, okay, well, I'll make one because that's what I want to see. But no, you never know where things are going to go after all these years. You put a lot of time into something and it starts to bear fruit, and you're thinking, wow, I've been doing this for so long. I mean, sometimes you wonder, did I waste all my hours in my day?
Well, it's funny you say you wanted to create something that you would want to see, and that's kind of been my MO with my YouTube channel. It's basically been, I wanted to go to YouTube some nights and I just want to talk about Phil Collins or talk about Genesis, and I just want somebody to talk to me about them because none of my friends will talk to me about them, and my wife's had it, so it that's kind of I'm like, I'm going to create something and we're going to sit around and talk about the stupidest, smallest little nuance for 45 minutes. And I think that's great, though. And so, no, you haven't wasted your time, obviously. There's, 10 million people on YouTube who would disagree that you wasted your time. But, I think this book shows it. And I've been hearing from people commenting about who have gotten this book. And it does something. I mean, of course, there's the community, but I think for all of us, we would be just stuck thinking about this in our mind, which might be good enough, but to be able to do it together is better.
Yeah, so I really tried to make something that spoke to the collector, that was all of the things that we have gone through through the years and things we spend our time on, the things that we find interesting in these items. But if I could backtrack just a little bit, with all due respect, I'm not sure any of us are going to buy that this is your first rodeo in doing these video blogs. You must have had some experience in radio or media, or what were you? How did you get involved in doing these other than just this idea?
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, this is really rich coming from the guy with the actual radio voice. So, no, well, I have a similar, this is my only channel in this space, but I do run a company where I talk to people about record labels. So I'm working in the record label field. I do weekly episodes on camera where I teach people how to start an independent record label and how to, improve and grow and interact with fans and stuff. I've been in the music business as an independent artist, as owning my own record label. I've just been doing this for a really long time. And the Phil Collins part of it, when I was interviewing, part of my other channel is interviewing, like we're doing now, but interviewing record label owners. That's a huge passion for me ever since, and I mean, a lot of us in this community is, when you are a kid, you look at the label, or in my case, you open up the No Jacket Required J card, and you read, what's this company? Who's Atlantic? Who's Virgin? What is this? You think it's an office where Phil Collins sits all day. And so that started my obsession with record labels. And so I talk about record labels all the time, and I do that. And I interview other record label owners once a week. I've been doing it now for 5 or 6 years, and it's kind of something I only do for 2 days of the week. And it's left me with some extra time. And I love talking to people. And the only thing I love more than talking about the music business and record labels is talking about Phil Collins. And that's something I love to do a lot more. And so I thought, let's see if I can turn the and I started with a podcast, the idea of a podcast, but I couldn't get the guests to commit. I mean, in order to get 52 guests a year, I sent out 4 emails, and I heard back from one, and that one was a maybe. So, I had to pivot to creating some more just, fluffy content, and then we could do more serious stuff as it grew. So anyway, yes, I've done stuff similar to this before, but this is my first foray into Phil land. And
because I do find it very polished. I find
thank you.
The way that it's structured, all the content is very well done, and it's rare that we see a channel that just started to have it done so well. And I was thinking, this isn't his first rodeo, so
busted. Well, I'm not an industry plant. I haven't been paid by Tony Smith to come here. I would take the money though. Well, you know what? I'll tell you, it's easy to do because I am doing it already. When I'm in the shower, when I'm laying in bed at night, I'm thinking about my top 10 Genesis album openers. I'm dreaming about what bootlegs I want to find. And I think it was, I'm not sure if I had started the channel yet, and I didn't really know that bootlegs existed. I think I was 2 months out from when I had started the channel, and I didn't know that bootlegs were a thing. And yet I had discovered the torrent site, and I was really loving all of the fresh content, discovering digital bootlegs. But I'm a vinyl guy. I love the turntable and listening to. And I went into a record store. My daughter was in a hockey tournament. I stopped by this store I hadn't been in before, and they had yellow foam, bedside foam. They had the Emerald City. They had a big Genesis one that included the Duke era stuff, and then there was one other. Oh, and then the White Mountain, and they had all 4 of them for $40 each. And I had never seen them before. I didn't even know this was a thing. And then that just, to bring it back to the collector, that fire was ignited in me. And now maybe a year and a half later, I maybe have 20 of them, but there's another 200 out there for me somewhere in the world. But anyway, that was just a few months before starting the channel.
Okay.
And so, it really does, it comes so natural because I'm thinking about this stuff all the time. I'm thinking about it all the time. And I love it so much. I never want it to end. Like the kids they want me to move out. Like there is nothing that is played in this house that is not Phil or Genesis. The odd Aunt Philip record or Peter Gabriel goes on, but they're going to kick me out. Anyway, let's get back to the interview.
Okay.
So let's plot ourselves on a timeline for me, because the big claim to fame that most people would know is the Bataclan footage. And Tom, in interviewing you with tabletop Genesis, the best podcast out there, of any podcast, Tom was talking about how he just made this comment about how you expect a restoration to be good, certainly better than prior, and sometimes you're really impressed. And that's all here, but then that footage was way up here. It was just, I watched it again today for probably the millionth time, and you just want to touch him. You know, you just want to reach in and feel his face. It is just surreal. And as Mike Lord said, the only downside of it is the camera work. You know, I wish that we had one camera on Phil the whole time. But anyway, plot me on the timeline, because I want to talk about the book. I'm obsessed with the book, but plot me on the timeline from when that film dropped and it kind of went viral, certainly in our community, but also in the mainstream media. When was the origin of the book? When did that get conceived and thought, hey, this is going to be our next thing that we do with respect to that? I think was it spring 2022 for Bataclan, or?
I think it was 2021.
Oh, I'm sorry. Spring. Okay. Maybe March 21.
Yeah. Maybe 2021 was when we originally were working with it. Okay. My timeline might be a little bit messed up too.
I apologize, but
I mean, I may be wrong, but the origin of that was essentially through a guy that I work with in France named Thomas Machon.
Sure.
Whose name I'll butcher, unfortunately, because my French is not so good. How's your French being up there in Canada?
Terrible. Okay. It's about as good as yours. Yeah, right. you would think, but I know the curse words. That's all I know.
So we've had a lot of success with film and video because there's a lot of people who I work with who I consider part of the museum who are all in different parts of the world. And in this case, Thomas was in France, and he had access to the originals for this film. And we decided to see where could this go. And it wasn't an original like, you know, what I have with the Shepperton, which we'll get into at some point, which is over and over here. It wasn't an original that you could touch with your hands, but it was a copy of a digital of something. And it needed work. And I think you would also be amazed if you saw what it was we had started with, because it's quite a journey with a lot of different versions and a lot of different software and a lot of testing. And I'd send it back to him and he would say, oh, it's to this or to that. And we went through this process for the better part of a year until we had something that we felt was really where we'd like it to be. The other issue that we always deal with is none of us own any of the material in this band because we're just fans. I mean, I don't know the band. I'm not hired by them. And in fact, in many cases, I think they believe that we're somehow making money off of them. So I don't think they really want to work with us. So there's rights issues that we had to deal with. The Bataclan has some rights. The INA in France has some rights to their own video. Genesis has some rights to their likeness, and the band, the record company has rights to the music.
Yeah.
So we couldn't just take it all and put it out there right away. We had to deal with some of those sorts of issues. But at some point we felt, okay, well, this is at a point where we'd like to release this. And to your point earlier, no, we had no idea what was going to happen. To us, this was just another thing we had been looking at for a year and a half. And we put it out there and it just exploded. It ended up on Rolling Stone, and it got in some ways more attention than we normally like, because what we didn't want was a kind of letter that we've gotten in the past from the powers that be. Yeah. So, you know, in this case, it goes on that we don't make any money from YouTube. All of that gets paid to the royalties to the record companies.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, the Bataclan loved it. They contacted me to do an interview. They put it on their website and on their Facebook page, and it got a lot of positive attention. So it was really, one of those successes that we love to have if all the things fall into place.
Was there any sense? I mean, I thought I had heard, I don't know if it was from Nick Collins, but did you get any feedback that other people in the band or in management had seen it and had appreciated it? I mean, you've got to think if you can get footage of yourself from your childhood in HD, who wouldn't want that? It would be an interesting little portal.
Steve Hackett, unfortunately, is the only band member that's really interested in the past of Genesis. So
Okay.
I'm sure that the other members had seen it. We've talked to the Peter Gabriel's archivist, and
Hmm.
we've talked to Tony Smith and so forth. And of course, they know of this material.
Yes.
But as far as them sitting, watching it, and enjoying it, I think that Steve Hackett would maybe be the only one that would really have done that.
Interesting. That brings me, I'm scattered all over here with my questions,
That's
but
fine.
we're flowing naturally. But that brings me to something that I took from your book that was really, really interesting. And it was the many times where you quoted and you referenced almost as like kind of almost as a defense of collectors, but you quoted and referenced Phil's Alamo book quite a lot. And it really introduced this strange dichotomy in my mind of Phil being so shocked and dismissive to his fans and to collectors is why would you want my running shoes? Why would you want a ticket stub? Yet at the same time, he wakes up early in the morning, click, 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 and tries to find something from the Alamo in the same way that you and I do for Genesis. I just thought that it's so hypocritical, you know what I mean? But I found that dichotomy to be so interesting, and it's referenced a couple times throughout the book. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, that was a thread I tried to pull through the book. I thought it was very interesting. I don't know that he would. I think he does have a sympathy for us and our collecting.
Sure, sure,
He's one of the most generous band members as far as signing things, giving things for charity.
right,
You'll see many things signed by him that says thank you for your support. So this has been a charity item,
right.
and so I know he knows that these things are important to fans, but you don't really get it unless it's your band, unless it's
That's right.
your item.
That's right.
I can show you a test pressing from a band, In Sync or something, and you would say, well, why?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
maybe we'd look at his musket balls and his
for
leather
sure,
pouch from Davy Crockett and say, that's has no interest for us. But
100%.
it is very funny, and that's why I put it in the book, of how we're so attached to his items that he really has no interest in himself. These sticks I have up on the wall that he used, he probably discarded without another thought.
Yeah,
And yet he's sitting there every day. I mean, he's filled an entire museum in the Alamo, donated all the items, and yet he's still every day looking for more. So that doesn't tell you somebody who has the sickness like we do.
yes, I did find it quite encouraging. And I because you do kind of feel like, why am I obsessing over the items of these people and they have no interest in them, let alone, they're dismissive of some of the music, let alone the acetates or the drumsticks they used. Yeah, I know. I found that so interesting. The other thing I pulled from the book so much was the concept of parameters and just this idea of course, one man's trash is another man's treasure. At the same time, one man's treasure is another man's trash. Like you were saying with the NSYNC thing. I mean, that story you mentioned is so funny because I was at a fair the other day and the guy asked me, "What are you looking for?" I said, "Genesis bootlegs." He says, sorry, I don't have any." And then he grabs maybe a Zeppelin bootleg and he says, "I have this." And I'm like, you know what I mean? It's like, no thing. It's like whenever you ask for a size 10 shoe and they pull out a size 5, it's like, great, but that's completely irrelevant to me.
Right.
But these ideas of parameters I found to be so enlightening in your book. And I don't know if it was a thread that you tried to bring through or if it was just something personally that I pulled. And I think you addressed at the very beginning. And a lot of people in the Facebook comments too would say, it's about the music for me. I don't want garbage. I'm a minimalist. I don't want things. it's about the music. I would have thought the same thing for myself because I primarily collect vinyl and cassettes. And but I think there's something more to it than that, because if it were about the music, well, we all have that. We can stream that right now. We can fit it all on our phones. And so I found that the idea of individual parameters, whatever those may be, I found that to be so interesting and so enlightening for me as a collector. Can you explain that a little bit? Is that something that came to light for you, putting this together?
So I did put a lot of that in the book. There is a section in there that we call the collecting rules. Some collectors and I call them rules. So we may have something even written down that says, unless it meets this size requirement, it is not a poster and it is not something that I collect. Now, the reason this sometimes comes up is there may be something that somebody doesn't have or doesn't want to spend money on or doesn't want to pine over. If they can say, well, it doesn't fit my parameters, it doesn't have to be something that they are looking for anymore. They can put it out of their mind. If it had met their parameters, now it's something that goes on the want list, and that's something that we don't want to keep adding to.
Oh, good thought. So it's psychological.
It's a psychological. So, for example, if somebody is a collector of official vinyl, and I show them I've got this great trespass. There's some photos in the book from Taiwan with a red cover, and I said, "Look, this is from," and they said, "No, this doesn't qualify. The record label isn't this, and this doesn't, so this is not something that goes on there. I do not have a need to buy list."
That's a great point. That is a great point. I think that sounds a lot like me. That sounds a lot like me. I see things in the wild and I think, no, that's not for me. I don't want to go down that route. That's very funny. Am I wrong to think, was there somebody who admitted, one of the collectors you interviewed, that he admitted to at one point collecting everything that said the word Genesis on it? Like not just Genesis
that was
stuff,
Paul Davis. And he was joking, although he said it was really happening at some point.
Okay.
He would get a magazine that said Genesis, but it was nothing to do with the band. Or he would get I've got a grill. I swear it's just a coincidence, but the grill is a Genesis grill. We've got cars in the US that are Genesis cars. But he was literally getting these random things that said Genesis on it. And he says, one day somebody's going to find me buried in a pile of random Genesis related items.
Yeah.
And, of course, those are periphery items that most collectors wouldn't be interested in. But, it just sort of speaks to the sickness that we have.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when I heard that, I thought, okay, that person is crazy. It's always nice to have, you need to have someone crazier than you, because we're all just irrationally pretending that we're rational.
Sure.
So it's nice to have people like that. Do you have parameters in the museum?
I do, but generally speaking, I mean, I collect all sorts of different things, but the parameters for myself are, it has to be something that's unique and off the wall, and I'm not really sure. It's got to be just weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I had some fans came by during the Gabriel tour, and they came to look through the museum, and they said, "You really don't have that much vinyl." I mean, I looked at my vinyl. I mean, I've got maybe 2 shelves worth over there, and they're the weirdest, rarest, most interesting vinyl there is. But a stock copy of something, good luck. It's probably not there. It just didn't, appeal to me. Or maybe I didn't encounter it where I was going. So, yeah, I've got the weirdest, I've got like this puppet from Argentina over there. I've got these scarves that were sold by bootleggers outside of shows. Those were interesting.
Yes.
I've got these little figures here. There's a Phil one and there's a Gabriel one. I love the Buddha flag. That's another one of my favorite things up there. These two records, I realize I'm pointing at nonsense here, but they're from they're Air Force records that were done for the armed forces.
Are they in the book?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So,
I saw that. Yeah.
they're interesting to me because they were pressed for people in the armed forces, and they could hear things that were going on at home. So these armed forces radio companies would put one side of Genesis and they'd pick some random songs. And if you look at the Selling England one, there's just random things. I mean, it's got like, there's no hits on there at all.
Weird.
And then on the other side could be a totally other artist.
Wow.
And they were brought to the field and they were played, who knows, once or twice so that people could hear. And then who knows what happened to them. And so I found a couple of them. I know there are others in the wild, but to me, those are interesting. Whereas a stock copy, maybe is just not my thing.
Sure. Well, it has a story attached to it as well. It has they potentially have traveled.
Yeah, sure.
What about new items? I don't know if I use this example in a recent video, but if I were to think of my Genesis collection, this right here is probably one of my favorite items in my Genesis collection, which is totally meta and ironic, but it's because I started a YouTube channel about Phil Collins, which is a crazy idea, and a year later I'd met 1,000 people, and somebody sends me a book that I can talk about and read and celebrate with the community. So this means more to me than my stock copy of any of my records that you can get anywhere. Mm-hmm. So tell me about that, about how there are, in a way, new things being made, whether they're official or unofficial. Is that something on your radar?
For sure. I mean, if you can get a book, I've got many books in the museum that were sent to me by the author, signed by the author. Mm-hmm. I love those. I love books. I don't have quite as many as Paul does. He has probably the closest to what we consider a complete collection. He buys all the language translations and all the cover variations.
Yeah.
But I've got a lot from the author, and I love to get those. And certainly if there are new releases, for example, those box sets, those relatively new, I have those in there for sure. The new mixes, Peter Gabriel's album, I'm of course gonna get when that's released.
Sure.
So I don't shy away from getting new things at all, but I also look a lot for getting something that's new to me, but that is something that's maybe 50 years old at this point.
There was some talk in one of the chapters, one of the collectors was talking about their digital collection. And now I'm old enough to talk about going back to the modems and downloading stuff back in those days and filling up your 250 megabyte hard drive. And I back then I do remember having a little bit of a collection of MP3s, pre-streaming days. And it was the smorgasbord of Napster. I do remember referring to my digital music as a collection. But as soon as Netflix came along, and as soon as, of course, the streaming platforms came along, and then the second revolution of vinyl, I don't consider any digital products to be a collection. They're in the cloud. I can multiply them millions of times. What do you think about digital? Does the museum consider anything digital? I mean, now we're kind of talking about NFTs in a weird way, but do you think about digital items at all?
Yes. They're actually a big part of the museum because we used to think as digital as being a solution to everything. Mm-hmm. Because if you need to get Top Gun, you can look that up. It's no problem. But if I asked you, I need to look up a costume, Gabriel wore it early in 74, he stopped by April. We need to find what's the costume he had, how did he use it, what was the stage looking like at that time. You can't just pull that out of the cloud. Right. So a lot of what the museum has in the digital collection is, there's got to be hundreds of thousands of files. From everything from posters, people have sent tickets. I've got little negative and slide scanner over here, and I've got this air can always at the ready because I'm always blowing dust off of things. And I scan them in, and it it becomes something that is almost more difficult to maintain than a regular collection,
Sure.
because there's so many photos and so many negatives and so many items people have sent that I know that I have it somewhere, but I might not be able to go and find it. So a magazine may contact me and say, we need this for the magazine. Can you get us a better photo of it? And I'm thinking, oh my God, where do I find this?
Yeah.
And you would laugh at my organization, my digital organization, but it is listed by where I got the item. So it's not listed by tour. It's not listed by date. It's listed by Bob gave me this thing. So I've got a Bob folder, and I could remember for some reason. I
That's
remember,
good. I would do that
Bob
too.
sent me that thing.
Yeah.
And so if somebody needs photos from a particular tour, if somebody needs a scan of a particular item, a poster or something, I can go through there and say, oh, yeah, this is where it came from. And then I could search through and find it. But the digital arena is not the end of the collection, because you still have to maintain it. You still have to have a hard drive that's not going to fail you. You still have to have backups. And I've got endless hard drives and DVD backups from all the years that I've been doing this. And even on the the project that we have coming up, I recently went through the old version that we had. I went to go search through the old DVD that I got sent 20 years ago and try to compare to see. I needed to answer some question. And so unless those digital things are retrievable, they're not any better than, the shelf over there if I can't find what they are.
For sure. And so thinking about digital audio files, there was some mention about how some folks have digital audio files that they haven't shared with anyone. Is there any sort of, I won't say value, but rarity to any digital? I'm specifically asking about music files.
For sure, there is. The one issue that I brought up in the book was, in the days when you used to be able to trade things through the mail, when there wasn't this internet, there wasn't this YouTube, you could trade it with your friend, and basically your friend would be the only one that would have it, or maybe a couple of his friends were. If in a broad sense, 10 people would have it, 20 people would have it. But now if you sent it to your friend, it may end up on YouTube, and now millions of people have access instantaneously to this item. So that has made some people who have these rare recordings hesitant to share them, because once they're shared once and it ends up on the internet, then everything that they have has no rare value. Or maybe it's something that they were given because they knew somebody that worked for the band, or they knew somebody who worked for the radio station. It exposes them. So, for instance, if you contacted your local radio station and somebody there found a recording you're looking for, a concert they recorded, and they said, hey, you're a friend of mine, here's a copy, but really this can't be publicized, I work here, and so forth. You may give it to your friend, you may give it to another person, but if it ended up on the internet, now it's a bigger problem.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I had never thought of that. I wonder if I should go to my local college radio station, see what they have kicking around. I got to go. That's so interesting. Okay. So going back to the book, we're all over the place here, but
that's fine.
I love the book so much. And I know we've done a review on it. It's so heavy. We just shipped somebody in our Patreon won a copy, thanks to you guys. And the cost to ship it to Scotland was insane. It's going by boat right now just because it's so heavy. But actually, I want to know about this production thought process when it comes to putting these books together, because in a way, this is the first real life form of the museum outside of coming to visit you. I think the easiest thing to do would be to do a PDF. The second easiest thing would be an ebook. The third easiest thing might be a loose paper, photocopied black and white paper. Certainly the hardest thing to do would be this 10-pound, 12-pound hardcover with full color pages, glossy pages. And I mean, even there over Zoom, you can see just how crisp the photos are. And I can easily read the timestamps on this test pressing in the corner. So can you tell me a little bit about that production thought process? Is that if we're going to do this, we're going to do it so well like this? I mean, that was a huge undertaking.
Yeah, for sure. And if there's one thing that the museum has done over the years is we never do the easy way. The easy way is everybody does it. The easy way is, I don't know, maybe it's not so interesting. Maybe it's something that people wouldn't value as highly if we made a PDF. But at the end of the day, we're collectors. We love to touch and feel these items.
That's right.
And I wasn't really sure at first how to put the book together. So what I did is I laid the whole thing out and I made it look nice on the screen. And I had a test copy made so I could just see, what does this look like? And it was so much nicer. I had some versions out to people, Mario Giametti and Thomas and a couple others, and they hated reading it on the screen. They were it took them forever, and the text is annoying, and it really wasn't clear. And when I got the test copy on print, and I was like, this is finally something that is really enjoyable to look through. And yes, it's expensive. Yes, it weighs a ton. Shipping on this project is no joke. I not only have all the books stacked up here, I have all of the shipping materials. There's hundreds of dollars worth of duct tape. There is a labeler machine. There is a trip every day to UPS who's sick of me walking in there with more of these books than I can see over.
Wow.
And it's a giant project that I recommend nobody take on. It is every time I go through it, I think this is a mistake, and why didn't I just make a PDF and people can pass it around?
Yeah.
But really, at the end of the day, we're collectors. We love what is the best form of this thing, and we love to touch it. We love to the numbering of it, the signed numbered copies, and I think that it really made it a special thing. For me, it was a great summation, a nice summary of what we've done with the museum all these years. It celebrated all the different people in there. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to offer this book, which is very heavy and expensive to ship, let me at least just sell it for cost. So whatever it costs to print and ship, that's what it goes for. I have no interest in filling out a tax form for profits on this thing. It turns the hobby into a job.
Sure.
So yeah, I made it as cheap as I could, even trying to make it as high quality as possible, and people have really appreciated it.
They really have. Everybody who has gotten a copy, I think, is blown away by the quality of it. And I mean, it's the kind of thing where I rushed through the first half because I knew that I had to do the review in quick time. But now I'm slowing down and I'm going to go back over it again. And I've already gone back over it. I find these types of things to be fun reference guides too, and a little bit of a Christmas list as well, unfortunately, some things. It's got me into, I'm now interested in, and somebody had just sent me some Peter Gabriel bootleg tapes. We're going to do it in another video. But it's now got me on the hunt for Phil Collins and Genesis cassettes, bootleg cassettes. There's somebody in here who has a big collection, and now I have something new to collect for the next 30 years. So,
great.
Anyhow, the book is so great, so great, and I'm so glad you did decide to go that route. Another thing that really surprised me, and I mentioned this in our review, and I want to know when this idea popped in your head, is when you do something like this, it's pretty common to just think picture, with a little bit of a footnote under each picture. And that's it. And then maybe a reference guide, which we have published before, but a list of all the things that exist in the world. But instead, you decided to go a little bit more editorial, talking about the nuances of collecting and the history of the museum, and the concept of value and the monetary component of this. What made you think to go that route? And I said it in a review. This is a book. Like, you're reading a nonfiction book. And it just so happens to have some nice photos as well. So what made you think to go that route?
I think we've become a little bit jaded in these years of the internet, to where you can go into Google and type in Peter Gabriel Genesis photograph, and you'll get 1,000 photographs. You can put in Genesis poster, and you can get 1,000 posters. And on the museum, there are I think it's up to maybe 5,000 different items on there.
Wow.
And I thought to redo the museum would be would do a disservice to somebody who's actually spending money on the book. And I also felt in the book, at which you may have grasped, was I don't want the collecting to be about the items solely. I wanted to show that we have these other components that we are really valuing: the relationships, the relationships to these items, the memories they bring back, the reason that we are attracted to item A, but maybe item B doesn't do that for us. And I think if I had 1,000 pages of just, here's some more tickets and here's some more backstage passes, I think people would flip through kind of fast.
100%.
And I made a big effort with the book, so that if I was flipping past the page, I had failed that page. I wanted every page to be like, oh, well, this is really interesting. This is an idea I didn't think about before. And so I made it less about the items and more about the all of the meaning behind it, the whys, and the these relationships that we have, the relationships we have with the band, whether they realize it or not, more than just a printout, which you can get anywhere at this point.
That's right. And I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you did. It was, and I think you alluded to this, that here I was expecting a book about Genesis, or a book about, and I think you even, referred to the idea that we're all expecting to go Charterhouse, and like hear the beginning of the story. But it's so funny how it really is a mirror. This whole book is a mirror. It's not about Genesis. It's not about the items. It's about you. It's about me. It's about my collection. And, whether that was intentional or subconscious, it started to come through, where I would put the book down and I would think about what I have in my collection, what I want next. Why do I love these things so much? Like, why are they so visceral? So that really truly is my, and I'm pumping its tires too much, but it deserves it. But that's really what I pulled from the book.
Yeah, and I think you sort of summed it up when you said that you're going to find people that are crazy in your mind because of how they collect and what their collection looks like, and you're going to find somebody in there that you're like, that's me.
That's right.
That person in Stockholm, and that person is me, because their collection speaks to me, and how they started collecting, that's how I started.
Yes, absolutely. I also found it very interesting too. Some of the stories of the collectors were fantastic. And I found it interesting where you would think everybody came in 1970, 1971, everybody discovered the band at Trespass, but it's not true. It's people who discover the band in 2000 or in the late 80s, for someone to say my first record was Abacab, or for someone to say my first record was, I think somebody commented on my YouTube channel just last night, they said their first record was We Can't Dance, and that's why it's so meaningful to them. That personally is what I love about the band. I love that about the band, that they didn't die or break up in that golden era, whatever people will call the golden era. And so I was surprised about that in the book, is so much diversity all around the world and different ages too.
Yeah, for sure.
How did it come together? Like I said, the pictures are so good. The collections are good. I would be so pissed off if the collections was a zoomed out 2-inch by 3-inch photo, but they're big photos. Did you go to these collections? Did they just take good photos for you? Because they're all high res photos.
Right. Well, most of the items in there are from the museum, and the simple reason was that I'm able to make a high quality photograph of them. I have,
Okay.
scanning equipment. I have camera equipment that I can do, and it wouldn't have been right to ask people to do too much with that regard.
Okay.
So most of the items in there are from the museum. Now, when we have the items that are on the page for that particular person I'm interviewing,
Yes.
yes, they did send me photographs of items. Sometimes I needed to get extras. And of course, they sent me, 50 photos, and I picked the ones that I thought worked best. I thought I picked the ones that worked with whatever their expertise was in, something
True.
that was unique about them.
True.
There's a collector, Chris Simmons, who his whole page is record awards. It's actually, he's got a lot of different items in his collection, lots of different things. It's not just record awards, but I thought that was where his specialty was. It was kind of nice and visual. And so that's what ended up on his page. So,
well, and it adds to the diversity of the book. For me to see that there are people who collect bootleg cassettes, then there's people who regular cassettes, or then there's the T-shirt people, or then the record things, or the kind of traditional memorabilia. It's cool to see the whole spectrum for sure. Very interesting that this book wasn't about money. That you would think a collector's guide in a way. You would think that, like, how much, okay, I've got this, how much can I get for it on the market? It really, of course, there's a chapter about value, there's a chapter about condition, but really it's not all about money. It certainly is not for us collectors. So, but I was pleased to see that in hindsight, going through the book, that we didn't talk about it very much.
No, and in fact, there have been price guides put out. Record Collector magazine will give you price guides on various collectibles. They're worthless because they change all the time. It depends on who's looking, where the item is, and to that point, their specialty are vinyl records. And so maybe if they do have some level of usefulness, they're not going to be able to value a poster or a ticket or a signed whatever. So there have been attempts in the past to put values on things. And even on my website, I have included values in the past. But give it a year and they're worthless. And I regret, I put in the book, I regret any of those that I put on there. They're next to meaningless. And the other reason is that if you talk about some of the items in there, there's only one. What are you going to put a value on a poster or a test pressing where there's only one? Are you going to go and start looking around for that? There isn't. So, yes, it can give you an idea. Yes, we know some of these things have value, but I think to point at an item and put a number next to it, it really defeats the purpose of it.
Well, and it really, the proof is in the pudding, is that most people in the book, myself included, or myself as one of these people, is that there's just not a lot of people who are interested in selling their items. Some people want to maybe get rid of it for, so that it doesn't bury them, but most people are not interested in selling, so I don't care what it's worth.
Right, and I think if you're going to buy the item, you really need to divorce yourself from the value of it, because you're not going to make a ton of money selling it. You didn't buy it with the intention of selling it.
That's right.
And if you were to one day sell it, auction it, whatever, the value is going to be so different, it's not even worth thinking about. You should just get the items that make you happy, enjoy it while you can. And if somebody is interested in it when you lose interest, then even better.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's talk about go back to the footage and the work you do, because we have something coming out tomorrow. And so for the folks who watch this episode on the day it comes out. God bless you. We love you. Thank you. But for the folks who are watching this, Genesis Museum on their YouTube channel is dropping something tomorrow. Can you give us a little preview and tell us what that will be?
Right. So we're always releasing interesting things that we find, but there's something in the collector's mindset that loves the anniversary. And we released a 50th anniversary of the Bataclan earlier this year, which seems a little bit odd because we only had released the other one the year before. But we did a little bit different thing with it, and we redid the audio with an audio engineer. And so the 50th anniversary is coming up of the Shepperton footage. And the Shepperton 1973 Shepperton Studios footage is well known as being one of the only high quality costume shows that was even recorded of Genesis. And we do have some other ones. We have the Melody, which is only on videotape, Betacam. There is there's some other ones, but there isn't the high quality 16 millimeter that we have for the Shepperton.
Right.
And the Shepperton is actually an interesting story because when I first became aware of it, this was in the very early 2000s. I'm thinking 2002. And I had seen it in an auction. It was a estate sale, New York estate sale. Wow. And this was at a time when the community was small enough. There was no Facebook. There was no social media, that we as friends would have these news groups and we would talk to one another. We had collectors we would talk to. One of the news groups was Paper Late, and another one that this group was called Meeks, run by this guy who called himself Meeks. And we saw this auction, and it was we knew it was going to go for some high dollar amount. And I'd been a new engineer at the time, and I didn't have a ton of money to spend on these things, so we decided to try a crowdfund. And this was before crowdfunding was a thing, and I basically got pledges from each of these people in this Meeks Genesis group, and they ranged from $20 to $200. Whatever anybody could put in, they did, and we didn't even know where the auction was going to end. We didn't know what the content was. We thought we knew. We thought it could be useful. We were hoping it wasn't damaged. And we just did our best. I won the auction, and then the crowdfund paid for the transfer, because at the time, all we had were DVDs, just regular DVDs.
Right.
And I sent it out for a transfer, and it was thankfully in reasonable condition. But as you saw in the sample, it has gone completely red. And that's a very common fading effect of the green and blue on these Kodak films. So I spent a lot of time making it watchable, but we didn't have great computers. We didn't have great tools. And of course, we only had DVD quality. And so we did our best, and we still loved it. We passed it out to everybody in the group, and we loved it. It was the first time you could see this band not sourced from a tape. It was, the first time when we actually had access to a film, and you can see one of the reels here, and there's another one on the wall, boop, right there. Okay. And so there's two reels for this. And that was in 2003, and we released the first version of that. Well, a few years later, Genesis is trying to put out a box set, and they're looking for this film. They have no idea where it is. They thought at the time it was produced like crap. The band hated it. It was done in a very peculiar way with different takes and close-up angles. Rather than just film the show, they did this they filmed it like you'd film a sitcom or something with different, redo that part where you point the flute at the camera. Now let's get this thing. So it was such a mess that at the time they never thought anything of it, and they didn't keep it. So I have this letter. This was in the book as well, but I X'd out the personal information. But this is a letter from Charisma Records, Glenn Coulson, who is looking for the Shepperton Studios concert.
Wow.
They want to release it on the box set, and they don't know where it is. So when the box set comes out, guess what? It has the version that we funded on there. That was all that they could get. So the box set on the Selling
And
England,
they got it from you? Did they get it from you?
not directly from me, but they, they got it from, the copies are wandering around by this point.
Okay.
So, I mean, it was even on the streets of Japan. You could get a DVD of this Shepperton thing. And so they had not looked into trying to find, or they weren't able to find a better quality copy. So, I still had the original here. So in 2000, I think it must have been 13, maybe 2012, HD was a lot more common. So I paid for an HD transfer, and then I put that up on the internet, and that's the one of my on my channel which has the most views. I think it's maybe 7 million now. And that was really the first modernization of this concert, because you could see where the dials are set, and you can see the grooves in the cymbals. And it was really kind of a raw transfer. By that I mean there wasn't the tools to really clean it up and give it the treatment it deserves. So in the ensuing 10 years, now we're 20 years after the auction, we're in 2023, and we're nearing the 50th anniversary of the concert. So everybody is giving me the quite obvious recommendation to do this in 4K, because now we have the equipment, we have much faster computers. An 8 terabyte drive is not as expensive as it used to be. And so I sent it out yet again for a 4K transfer. And I decide to really do the work this time on cleaning this thing up. And by cleanup, I mean by hand, frame by frame, cleaning little imperfections, scratches that used to be annoying. I cleaned up all of the titles. I corrected the color. Every single scene has different color settings, because when the film was produced, it was kind of a mess. And we talked to Thomas talked to the producer, Jerry Harrison. Is that his name? Yeah. So Jerry Harrison is the producer of it, and Thomas talked to him to try to figure out how was this put together. And earlier this year, I visited John Burns, who did the sound on it, and he talked about the sound and how it was in a audience of maybe 100 people. It was a studio setting, and John asked Tony Smith for the money to put up baffles for the sound, because you can't have all this sound in an empty arena. It's going to cause a problem. And of course, Tony Smith said no. And so the sound is a mess as well. And on some of the samples that I gave you, you can see the sound waves down on the right side of the film. And it's called optical sound, and it is a great way when you're making 16 millimeter movies to have sound synchronized and go along with the movie. But it does a very poor job for music, because it has a very limited bandwidth on there. And so we had tried over the years to get better sound off of this. We have tried over the years to get the sound from the band, but they're not interested in really working with the fans in that way. We'd love to put out a thing with some of the material from the band, but they're very they keep those things close to the vest. So I gave it's a shame, because I mean we all do this for free, and we'd love to work with them. But I was able to, with a new scanner, scan the waveform rather than use the old technology of some goofy light bulb that read the thing. And so I gave the audio to someone else that I work with named Tom Morgenstern in Germany, who he's an audio engineer, and he did a great job with the audio. So as I say many times in the museum, it's a group effort. I'm sitting there doing these frames of video, hoping I can really take this to another level, and not maybe knowing if it's even worth it. sending the film, to places to get different scans done, hoping that it could be really great. And I think it really turned out wonderful, to be honest. I've
Mm,
seen the film backwards and forwards, and you kind of get sick of it at times. But I think that it came out looking and sounding really nice. So
that's
if you look
exciting.
at the before and after, the thing that we had started with and where we ended up, it's quite amazing.
Unbelievable.
The
Yeah.
all the UV lights come through.
Mm,
All of the colors are there, and yeah, so we really are proud of it. And so we're releasing it, I guess, as you said, it'll be tomorrow when this is
that's right.
broadcast, and it'll be on the 50th anniversary of when it was recorded.
And the YouTube channel, I'll include a link, but it is Genesis Museum, right? It's just youtube.com/Genesis Museum.
Yes.
Yeah. The
Okay.
G and the M are capitalized, but it
Okay.
works. Yeah, well, that's so exciting. And that's the complete set.
Well, this is all that they played that day.
Yes. Yeah.
They played over 2 nights, and it was a mix of different takes, and they would play part of one song, and they'd stop, and they'd play part of it again with a different angle, and then they would mime. They did a lot of miming to the song. So,
Wow.
so yes, it's not a set like you would think a
Sure.
regular concert set, but it is an hour of the concert. It's got the full suppers ready. It starts with Watcher. It has Dancing with Moonlit Night, I Know What I Like, and Musical Box,
Yeah.
and
Beautiful.
all with full costumes and slides and films and effects.
Awesome.
So it's really the only high quality costume show that we really have.
That's great. Yeah. I can't wait to watch it. So you mentioned this on the Tabletop Genesis podcast, that the coverage that the Bataclan was getting through Rolling Stone and whatnot, and now with the book, that hopefully your profile is getting to a certain point where other people who aren't in the forums or on Facebook every day, but maybe some other fans or even non-fans might reach out to you and say, "Hey, we have this." Has that been happening?
Yes, we're always dealing with contacts and leads. We're following leads and talking to people. I always say there's 100 leads and 99 of them are bad.
That's
But
right. Yeah.
you have to follow each one, and it makes a big difference if you can give examples of your work. And
Mm,
so when we were reviewed in Rolling Stone, and we've been in Guitar World and a lot of other places, when somebody has their 8 millimeter or 16 millimeter footage, and they're trying to have somebody save it and work on it and do these sorts of things, we need to have a profile that shows that we know what we're doing,
that's
that we're
right.
not going to take the footage and run off with it or resell it or something like that, and that the product is going to be nice, and that we're going to do right by the owner of it. That
Right.
if they want it done in a certain way, if they want it put in a certain place and not in another place, we have to be sure that they're happy with it, so that the next time an opportunity shows itself, if somebody who I talk to says, "Hey, here's this guy I know," we have some good feet to stand on, so that we can work on the next project.
That's a great way of doing things. Tell me about, before I let you go, tell me about your collection. What lights you up these days? I mean, you're so busy with everything, but you must still get that sometimes at a thrift store or a record store.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always collecting. My collecting goes through different phases because I think you can be a fan of, let's say, magazines, and I certainly
Mm,
have plenty of them. But there does come a point when you say, okay, I can't even find my way through my magazine collection at this point. I can't read all of them.
yeah,
I certainly don't need to buy any more. Maybe they're not expensive, but maybe that's not the biggest issue. So then I will move on to something else, and maybe I'll start to collect vinyl, or maybe I start to look for t-shirts, or who knows what.
sure,
But yeah, I'm always looking for things. There's always auctions for things. There's plenty of items that I don't buy because either they're more than I'm looking to spend, or maybe they're not quite the item that does it for me. but yeah, I'm always looking for them. I'm always talking to other collectors. I recently bought a large collection of slides from an old collector,
Cool.
a few hundred of those. And it's just great to, in those cases, I put them in the slide scanner and I can see different parts of shows that maybe I haven't seen before. And there's always something in the collector's world to light you up and to say, hey, this is something that I'd love to have, and maybe I can add it to the museum.
I was curious, just if, from your experience, you're in America, right? I'm in Canada. I'm wondering, are we at a disadvantage when it comes to specifically records, but any sort of collectibles? Are we at a disadvantage than people in, let's say, Germany or the UK or Italy looking for stuff?
Well, certainly for Genesis, we are.
Yeah.
I mean, Genesis was very popular in the US for sure, but trying to find those great items, I mean, they're going to be in the UK, France, and Italy first, Germany for sure, and the US to some degree. But there's an awful lot of, okay, I would like to buy this, but it's got to come from Europe in order to make it down here. But a disadvantage, I don't know. Certainly when it comes to shipping. And it was nice years ago. You could ship things. I mean, you could have shipped that book for $10, $15 years ago, but those days are gone.
Totally.
So now you would ship a poster and it's easily going to be $20, $30, $40 just for shipping.
Well, I want to ask you, if you have a sec, I want to ask you some Phil Collins related questions for our Patreons as a bonus. But before I do, I want to say thank you so much for doing this interview. Thank you for sharing with what's going to be dropping tomorrow, and everyone's going to be checking that out just because you've set the bar so high. So we're all very excited. And then again, thank you for the book. And I think we're going to get to a point where every Genesis fan will buy one. I know that's a lot more work for you. But congrats on the book. It was well worth it.
Well, thank you. Just as a side point, it is about 70% sold out. So it is a limited edition. I know that a lot of fans would love to have it. I also know it can be expensive and some people maybe aren't book people, but I'm hoping that everyone who wants one can get one.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm just one guy. I sent you some of the, photos of the museum here, but it's, the books aren't sitting in a warehouse. They're just here, sitting with packing materials ready to be sent to the next buyer.
Well, I'm sure it won't take long, especially with Christmas coming. It's a great Christmas present.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button for exclusive videos, behind the scenes content, and to have your say on future topics before I film. Have a look at our Patreon page. Thanks for watching.